Welcome to Get Your Mind Right, Boots on the Ground, where we spotlight professionals in the field who have overcome challenges and how they work through them. Their stories offer real-world insights and tips for thriving in today's competitive landscape.
Good morning and welcome to Get Your Mind Right, the world's only podcast devoted to digital marketing and merchant services professionals. With me today for our third episode in this series is the expert on risk and underwriting, Conci Yoder.
Hello, John Johnson.
Well, good morning, Conci Yoder.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Folks, she got married recently, and I choke on this every time. I want to say no.
It's okay. I still do too sometimes. We'll all get used to it one day. Maybe after a year or so.
Maybe a year or two.
Yeah,
or three.
maybe.
I'm stuck. So folks, at any rate, if you have missed our last episodes on this, Conci had two really great episodes, really making us understand what the chargeback processes are. There's some really odd terminology in that. And then on the last episode, walked us through that process and how the merchant has to deal with this and what those cases look like. And today, as you know, Conci represents the merchant side on this. Today, our focus is on winning these chargeback disputes.
All right.
Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready for you.
So Conci used this phrase a lot, best practices.
Okay.
So what's that mean in terms of chargebacks and disputes?
So really, in terms of chargebacks and disputes, best practices would really be, for me, your best practice on how to respond, as well as best practice is how to deter these in the future if you're a merchant that sees regular chargebacks coming through. Those just two scenarios, best practice to ensure you're deterring these in the future. I suggest getting documentation with your customers at the time of sale, making sure that you as the merchant are providing clear understanding of your return policy and shipping expectations. Really with the shipping expectations and return policy, make sure you're leaving no room for question.
Gotcha.
Right? If I'm going to order something from your business and that's not going to be shipped to me for 15 days, I'd like to be aware of, hey, there's 15 to 20 days where you might not get this. And that also helps the merchant because it's less likely the customer would charge that back because they're going to say, oh, well, they told me it'd be 15 to 20 days before I get that. So best practice is just being thorough, getting those little details that might take that extra 2 minutes to get, but that would be worth it in the long run to save you the money and time of dealing with chargebacks.
Gotcha. In my meeting prep, I ran across something as proving that the refund was issued before the chargeback started.
Yes.
I don't even know what that means.
So a lot of the times, merchant error. Back to when we spoke about merchant error, they accidentally double bill a customer. Right. The merchant, a lot of the times, they'll see that on their batch report. They'll say, oh, I see 2 charges for $100 for card 1, 2, 3, 4. So they'll give us a call, their handy customer service representatives, and they'll ask for that full card number, and they'll go ahead and refund the customer, but without the customer ever even being involved, notified. They'll just give them that refund. The customer may not notice that refund, but they may notice the double charge, which that happens a lot of time. When we look at the bank, we always see the negatives instead of the positives. But then the merchant would just provide a receipt and any other, portal confirmation. We would give them any screenshots that we would have, anything like that, just showing proof that, hey, we've already refunded this cardholder. And normally that will close the case. It'll be one in the merchant's favor because the cardholder was already refunded their owed funds.
Okay, very good. So tell me about mistakes that merchants make during this process, especially in regards to best practices. Tell me what they should not be doing.
What should they not be doing? I always suggest to be, organized, thorough, clear in your response. Giving angry, short-worded responses.
How about profanity? Does that help?
No, profanities, they don't help as much as we all think they do sometimes. They just don't. But, just being clear in your response, being concise. You don't have to give them a book's worth of information. Just a brief synopsis, a paragraph, maybe 3 sentences over what occurred and the documentation. I say the more detail, the better, but pertinent detail, right? You don't want to just give them, well, they came into my store eating a sandwich. That doesn't matter. So just being thorough with that.
Okay. So I'm gonna put you in a corner here.
Okay.
So if I'm the merchant, just give me the one single most factor that's going to be important for me winning that dispute.
The most important factor to win a chargeback dispute. Man, You did put me in a corner there.
It's a good thing you're not baby, because no one puts baby in a corner.
That is very true. Man, I would just have to say having documentation on the chargeback, on the transaction in question. You know, I know when I worked in retail, we would save our receipts for like 7 years before we went through. I actually went through and audited those as well. But we would save receipts and copies of items and paperwork for that exact scenario.
That's really best practices for business too.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's good. So what happens if a merchant they've already had that chargeback filed and they go ahead and issue a refund? Then what happens?
So similar scenario, if the chargeback has already been filed and if the merchant does decide to refund the customer, even though the chargeback has been submitted, they could still respond to that chargeback case and just provide that proof of refund to them.
Okay.
A similar scenario would occur. They would more than likely close the case in the merchant's favor since the customer was already refunded that money.
Okay.
Definitely not a suggested practice, though. We have seen it where those hand-keyed ones occur, and they may refund them after the chargeback's submitted. And I have seen instances where it is not one in the merchant's favor, and the customer gets that money twice. So not a preferred practice, but it can be a winner from time to times.
Yeah. So talk to me about fraud prevention. Okay. How can that play in reducing chargebacks?
Fraud prevention. So that actually can play a huge part in reducing chargebacks. That really, it kind of depends on the business type, on what they can put in place to prevent the fraud. Online merchants, having all the security features enabled on their online gateway, their online terminal, making sure that address verification's there, making sure that they've got CAPTCHA enabled on their website, those fun little pictures you click that say I'm not a robot. And then really just making sure that they're chip dipping their cards if it's card present. Chip dip is the most secure and less risky form of taking credit cards that a merchant can do, because that chip is all of the information about the cardholder. The swipe, that's a little more risky. And hand keyed, obviously, that's the most risky of all. So just making sure you're practicing the most secure practices of taking your transactions and having that address verification enabled, that's huge. That's major. I know any merchant I've talked to that's affected by card testing online, make sure that if anything on the address doesn't match, I would set it to decline if it was me personally as a merchant, especially someone who struggles with card testing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So you talked last time about processors. They'll only have, or they have a risk tolerance for chargebacks, right? So say you got a merchant, and I'm guessing a lot of merchants aren't even aware there's such a thing until they get that dreaded phone call, right?
Correct.
So what are you going to do to get them back on the right train where they're under that threshold and they don't get their card processing abilities turned off?
Yes. So a lot of the time we will go over timely delivery. We'll make sure they have all of their refund policies in place. It's also clearly explained to their customers, either by signage or listed on the invoice or whatever it may be. Also making sure that, they are, they're responding to the chargebacks that are occurring. That's the biggest part, I think, that a lot of merchants struggle with. Well, we're just not going to respond to it. It's fine. We just won't respond.
So a lot of these merchants run risk problems. That's really symptomatic if they're not running a very tight ship.
It seems to be. It seems to be a commonality when I see an increased chargeback occurrence on a merchant account. Sometimes, it's just bad luck. You got hit with a bad run of luck with a terrible customer or a scammer or somebody. I had your boat story you told me in our last episode.
Right.
I had similar scenarios where, people called in and then,
clearly ripped the merchant off.
The whole thing. But just making sure that they're responding. Responding is honestly the biggest thing they can do to help their percentage reduce and help deter further issues with chargebacks in the future.
Well, excellent. Well, Conci, generally, I give my guest on the last episode the last word, but I'm going to take it from you today.
Okay, all right.
You're the forgiving sort.
I'll let you.
So our audience is dominated by sales professionals, right? And one of the things I will tell you guys is that most of your merchants really don't have any notion or any depth of knowledge of a lot of these things that we talked about. And this is a great differentiator for you, okay? Because people that their current processor, people you're competing against, I can almost guarantee you they're not talking about these things. And when you talk about best practices and what we do to help keep that merchant in hot water, and we're delivering on that value proposition of increasing sales, decreasing costs, in the case of fraud, mitigating risk, it's really, really big stuff. This is the third episode, Conci. It's great having you on here.
It's been a pleasure.
I always enjoy hearing you talk. I'd like to have you come back on the show again.
Well, I'd be happy to. Just let me know when you got a topic I'd like to go over.
Well, I will do that. I will do that. For Conci Yoder, this is John Johnson here, reminding you to, hey, keep your mind right.